Hey, attorney Robbie Crozier here, and today I wanted to talk about why a holding company could be useful for you in your business, and why it might not. And I want to dispel some of the myths out there because within the attorney community, there is a lot of upselling business mechanisms, asset protection mechanisms, things like that, that people don't really need. So I wanted to give some valid reasons why some of these things might be useful and why they might not, and kind of dispel some of those misconceptions. So, speaking on holding companies, we recommend holding companies for clients in a few different situations. And for context, a holding company how we're talking about it right now is when you have, let's say, a parent LLC and then a child LLC underneath it, where the owner of that child LLC is the parent LLC. Now, this approach can give you, in our opinion, three different things. The first three different things that are useful. The first of those is anonymity. So if you form your LLC, your parent company, the holding company, in certain states, such as Wyoming or Delaware or New Mexico and a couple others, you can achieve anonymity, anonymous business ownership. Most states don't allow for this. There are only a total of, I think, five or six in all that allow for this process to take place. The one that we use most commonly is Wyoming. And what you do and the benefit that you derive from this kind of approach is, let's say you are a real estate property owner, and we've talked about this on a previous video where you're a landlord, you own a bunch of investment properties that you rent out. It could be useful for you to have an anonymous holding company that is owning an operating LLC that owns the properties. And the reason for this is, and again, I go into more detail in a previous video, but the primary reason is privacy. So if you have a crazy, angry tenant who wants to file a lawsuit against you, they're going to have a really difficult time figuring out who the individual owner is kind of at the end of this string of holding companies. And for that reason, that's a valid use case for having in this situation an anonymous holding company own an operating company which owns some properties. So one group of clients that we recommend holding companies to are real estate investors, particularly passive income rental real estate investors who want to have that additional privacy. A holding company could be useful if it's implemented the right way. Again, you have to be sure that the holding company that you set up is one in one of these states that allows for anonymous business ownership, and most do not. So just make sure whoever's setting that up for you knows what they're doing in that respect. The second kind of reason that we find a holding company could be useful is asset protection, but probably not the kind of asset protection that you're expecting. So, contrary to popular belief, and again, I blame attorneys for this largely, um, just having a second LLC on top of your first LLC for no reason really does not afford you any additional asset protection, any additional liability protection. If you go to court, you get sued, you're going to be just about as exposed as you would be if you just had one LLC instead of two. Really, just adding a second LLC or corporation, whatever kind of business entity you want, on top of the first one just complicates things for you, makes it a little bit more administratively burdensome to kind of keep up with all that. You're going to pay a little bit more in fees. There really is no benefit. But what can be useful from an asset protection perspective is if you have a business that, for operational purposes, uses expensive equipment, for example. So if you have a business, for example, we have a client who owns a diesel repair company, and they have a lot of really expensive equipment, repair equipment. And what you can do in this situation is you want to think about, okay, so if something happens to our business, how do we protect the expensive equipment that we've invested in and make sure that if, God forbid, a lawsuit happens, somebody gets a judgment against my business, how do I prevent them from getting to this expensive equipment? Ideally, if you've played your cards right, even if somebody wins a lawsuit against your business, there isn't going to be a whole lot for them to take from the business. They're going to be able to take whatever is in your business bank account, which if you've kind of been regularly taking distributions or salary from that business, there's not going to be a ton in the business bank account anyways, so that's not a huge deal. But you don't want them to get to that expensive equipment. So what do you do? How do you kind of separate that out? The answer is with a holding company, in this case, an equipment holding company. So what you can do is you have your operating company. We'll just call that, in this case, we'll use me as an example. We'll call it Robbie LLC. And that's going to be your customer facing business. In this case, let's call it a repair business. So Robbie LLC is a repair business here in Texas, conducting business as usual. Something happens, a lawsuit gets filed against us, but we're safe because in addition to setting up Robbie LLC, the repair business, I have also set up Robbie Equipment LLC. I'd probably name it something else and again, to kind of separate these two, but let's just call it Robbie Equipment LLC. It's a separate Texas LLC, and I have titled my equipment in the name of that LLC. I've transferred ownership of that equipment from my operating company or from me individually, whoever initially owned it, into this new LLC. So this new equipment holding company, Robbie Equipment LLC, is now the rightful owner of this equipment, and it is going to lease the equipment back to the operating company. It's going to lease it back to Robbie LLC. And so you have this relationship where the equipment, the expensive equipment that you don't want judgment creditors, people with a judgment against you, to reach in and grab, that equipment's not going to be reachable because it's owned by a different business, the equipment holding company. And the relationship, and it has a legitimate reason to be allowing the operating company to use it, and that is the fact that it has a lease agreement with the operating company. So in a situation like this, your equipment is protected, and that's a useful reason to have a holding company. The third reason for a holding company is not asset protection. It is really just ease of use from a logistics standpoint. So if you have a portfolio, let's say you're a serial entrepreneur with a portfolio of different companies that you've started and you're looking for investors. As you're raising money, you might want investors to have the option, to have the flexibility to invest in a number of your companies or all of your companies at one time. And so instead of having to track down each individual investor and say, hey, which of these companies do you want to invest in? Let's go ahead and get the paperwork done for every one of my 10 companies I own. You could say, hey, do you want to invest in all of my companies? And if they said yes, you can use a holding company. So what you do is you've got these 10 business ventures you've started, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, whatever that is, 10 of these businesses. Let's just say A through K. And then you're going to have a holding company over that, which we'll call ABC Holding Company. Instead of this investor who really wants to invest in all of your businesses, instead of them having to invest in A and D and G, they can just come invest in holding company ABC, which owns all of those subsidiary companies, and accomplish the same thing with a fraction of the time and cost involved to draw up the paperwork, get it all signed, all that stuff. So in situations we have clients who have a number of different businesses kind of operating simultaneously, and they want to be able to solicit investment in all of those businesses essentially at one time, it simplifies things a lot to be able to have investors just invest in the holding company and not have to get involved in each one of these businesses. It also simplifies things from a management perspective. It makes everything easier and cheaper. So that is the third reason that we suggest people use holding companies. So to recap that, first reason is anonymity and privacy. Important caveat there is that just by being anonymous in a business ownership context, that does not mean protection from liability. It's really just privacy. It's protection from crazy people. It can also be in a roundabout way. There can be some asset protection only from the standpoint of, if you have somebody who's considering suing you and they're kind of doing their due diligence and saying like, okay, what assets does this individual have that we could potentially take? They're researching everything. It's going to be hard for them to figure out that you own this portfolio of investment properties if you own them anonymously. So that's a reason that kind of crosses over into asset protection just with the privacy situation. Um, Beyond that, there is also the added benefit of equipment holding in situations where you might have a judgment against your operating company. Your equipment company can keep all that expensive equipment safe. That's reason number two. And reason number three is ease of use for investment purposes. If you have someone who wants to invest in your portfolio of companies, it's easiest from a logistical perspective to do it through a holding company. So for those reasons, I would recommend setting up a holding company for your business. All other reasons, there may be a couple more here and there, but just bear in mind that these are the most useful, legitimate reasons that you would want to spend the extra time and money to set up a holding company for your business. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe, and we will talk to you next time.